All right. I'd like to say hello to everybody, and I had to get something. All right. I'd like to say hello to everybody, and one would like to think that doing this type of stuff is easy. I did. I thought all I needed was gonna need a telephone and a computer or something or a microphone, and I don't know. It's a little bit more than that because I want to have some quality. So anyway, my name is Suni. It is November the 4th, 2020. And this is another installment of a project that I'm working on, a commentary called AA 12 Steps, AA 12-Step Recovery, from Darkness to Light. And this is the name of this topic, and that's the name of the topic, by the way, From Darkness to Light. And so what's going on is I have started starting on November the 4th, November the 1st, I started one of my commentaries titled the same thing, AANA 12-Step Recovery. And I talked about trauma. And I talked about how trauma is the breeding ground for actually addiction. And then I went through trauma. I went through the 4 levels of trauma: acute, chronic, complex, and then PTSD trauma. And so then I established from the different levels of trauma and their effects on how the addiction is bred, or the characteristics of addiction, which is obsessive and compulsive behavior. And I talked about and you can and please go back and look at those videos, because for the sake of where I'm going today, I'll be referring to those videos. However, if I do a complete recap, I'll probably be here for 35 minutes before I even get into the steps. And what happened was, short story is when I did those 2 videos, where I left off was at step 3. And so I'm just doing like just a little recap for those who's just maybe just tuning in for the first time. And for those who been keeping up a little bit, and I'm just doing just this little recap. So going back to what I was just saying before, then I talked about how obsessive, compulsive, and self-centered behavior comes out of trauma, and from then we go to the denial. I talk about denial and how denial is a system. It is actually a system that protects the addiction. So when you're looking at addiction, it's basically a science behind this stuff, right? Then I went on, and as I talked about denial, I talked about what? Hitting bottom. And how hitting bottom could or can shatter the denial, so one can look at the adverse effects on different levels of the trauma. And what are the different levels of the trauma? Mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And how I define those 4 areas of the human makeup, I said the mental is your thinking or your mind. And that's the way I'm using it. I'm not using it as a term of how intelligent and smart the individual is. I'm not using it like that. I'm using it just very simply, the intellect or the intelligence. When I talk about the emotional aspect, Only thing I'm talking about is the devotion or the devotional part. The devotional part, or how the addict or the alcoholic is devoted to their alcoholism or addiction. And then I talked about the spiritual aspect. The spiritual aspect meaning energy. So when I'm talking about for all my commentaries, that's what I'm going to call them. And from my perspective, when I talk about the spiritual aspect of the disease of addiction and the disease of alcoholism, all I'm referring to simply when I say spiritual is the energy that emanates or is contained by the addict or the alcoholic. And then when I talk about the physical is exactly what it is. The physical body. Or if I talk about a physical place, that's what I mean. No more, no less. And then when I went into the different aspects of alcoholism and the aspects of addiction, I talked about alcoholism, and I like to say alcoholism, that it is a way of life. Because the medical community, and not me, has termed it and recognized it as an ism, as a way of life. Like you have communism, like you have Catholicism, like you have socialism, like you have Americanism. You also have alcoholism, and it's deemed a way of life or a lifestyle. That's what it is. And when I talked about addiction, not only did I qualify the drug addict, I qualified the sex addict, I qualified the drug dealer, I qualified the liquor store seller, I sure did. I also qualified the prostitute, the overeater, I qualified the gambler, all falling up under the umbrella of addiction. Why? Because I identified, like I said earlier, obsessive and compulsive, or obsession and compulsive behavior as the fundamental keys or the foundation of addiction, obsessive and compulsive behavior, which results in total self-centered, not self-centered, because, some people say, you self-centered. I don't mind being self-centered. But total self-centered is very dangerous, because the only thing total self-centeredness is saying is that I don't give a damn about nobody, nothing but myself, and it will be expressed in their behavior, which could be very dangerous to life, property, and also a community. If as we see, when it comes to who? What? Drug dealers. Yeah, drug dealers. And also people that use. So moving on, so those aspects or the makeup of the body of addiction was described in those later pieces that I did, especially on the 1st and the 2nd of November. Now, what happened on the 3rd is I tried to put some more information out last night, and for some reason it disappeared. And also, that's what happened today. So I tried to put some more information out, and what happened was it disappeared. So anyway, moving on. We're going to move on. I got something that popped up on my screen I need to get rid of. Now, I got 4 camera positions up here, and I'll be switching intermittently. And guess what? This is my favorite one right here. It's about to pop up. I think it popped up already. Yes, it did. So today's goal is, on the commentary, is to walk through step 4 to step 5. Is to do step 4 and step 5. Now, how I believe steps should be done they should be done in this manner. Steps 1, steps 2, and okay, first let's qualify. One needs to have an attitude, needs to have an attitude of intolerance or indifference towards spiritual principles. And that attitude should be that this program could work for me like it worked for so many millions of people. And when I say millions, I mean literally millions. Because in short, what has happened since the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot of other 12-step programs have sprung up, and then there's derivatives, 12 Steps for Christ, Siratul Mustaqim for the Muslims, 12 Steps, I believe the Jewish community have their own. Then there's also Emotional Anonymous, Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, Fellowship Anonymous. So from the 12-step, from the 12-step model have sprung up many other programs. But understand and recognize the granddaddy and the granddaddy of them all is is Alcoholics Anonymous. Because that's the origin. That's the seed. That's like the Abraham of the 12-step community. So moving on, and that's how I look at it. How anybody else want to look at it is fine with me. I ain't got no argument with you. Me, myself, I've been in recovery for 34 years, 5 months, several days, and some minutes and some hours. I started off in AA. I mainly fellowship with NA. That's my fellowship. But however, who you fellowship is who you fellowship, and I also talked about that because that's where you want to fellowship at. But the steps are basically the same. The 12 steps are basically the same. You know, step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. In AA, they substitute the word addiction for alcohol. In step 2, is in AA, it just says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And in there it says, we came to believe. It says we. And so from step 2, I believe, to all the way step 11, is there's a we involved. So that be saying, and let me see, all the way up to step 12, there's a we. So when I look at the we, I have to say this, whether it's the AA we or the NA we, I'm looking at mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. I'm looking at the individual, the 4 makeups of the what four parts that makes up the individual. That's what I'm looking at when I say the we. So moving on. So now, the attitude of intolerance and indifference lays a foundation for the 12-step recovery. The next part of that foundation would be the honesty, the open-mindedness, and the willingness. The individual must have honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, or should be honest, should be open-minded, and have a certain amount of willingness. And willingness is like desire. It cannot be measured. Not from the recovery. Nobody can say how much willingness a person has, just like nobody can say how much a desire a person has. Now, speaking on desire, an individual must have a desire to work this program and must have a desire to stop their primary symptom of addiction. So moving on, it's the honesty, the open-mindedness, and willingness coupled with desire. And with these, we are well on our way to the steps. Because remember, steps is not going to work by what? By magic. Now what I have done is I have done a breakdown from my perspective on how I see the difference between being honest and telling the truth. And for me, there is a difference coming from a recovery perspective, which have always helped me. Telling the truth is merely a verbal statement of fact. And when I say a fact, it's the individual's experience, whether they experienced it themselves or they seen it. Whether they experienced a situation themselves or they actually seen it. And then they're talking about it and they're telling it about it. That's what makes something truthful. Honesty, however, is a truthful statement coming from the individual, something they have experienced, and then it's backed up by an action that supports the verbal statement. Very simple. The two difference between the two. Now with that, we are well on our way. What open-mindedness is very simple, that your mind is open to something new. Whether it's a suggestion, whether it's a person, whether it's a place, whether it's a thing. Open-mindedness is that you don't necessarily have to, and I say necessarily, a precondition, you don't have to necessarily change your views about when you're open-minded. It's just something that you're willing to listen or experience in the recovery perspective. And willingness will be equated with desire. You know, and I could probably look up the word willingness, and let's see if I could look that up a little bit. Let's see what willingness. Let's see what the internet has to say about willingness. What does willingness mean? And willingness means, it says willingness, the quality or state of being prepared to do something. Readiness. So just be ready or prepared. That's it. Just like for the 12 steps. Just be prepared and willing. Excuse me. And it says a quality or state of being prepared to do something. Just get prepared. Now, the preparedness to work the steps is two. One, that you've hit a bottom, and then I talked about bottom, which caused you to become willingness, and what might enhance your desire to want to do something different. Then there's the bottom. Well, I talked about, okay. Then there's the bottom, that a person hit in all four areas, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. It's the step one caused it the unmanageability of your life. So let's stop right there. And I talked about the hidden bottom. So let's say the person hits a bottom. We're going to move right into step one. And step one is an honest step. It requires honesty. And what it says is that we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. And when it says we, it means in all four areas, you are admitting that you were powerless over your addiction. And what powerless means that you didn't have no control. You didn't have no willpower. Your willpower was shot in all four areas over the primary symptoms of the disease of your alcoholism or your addiction. And when I say the primary symptoms, I mean the exhibited symptoms. The alcohol for the alcoholics, the drugs for the drug user, the lifestyle and the dealing for for the one that sells and deals. I said the lifestyle, because the lifestyle is very, very, very addictive. The cars, the sex, the money, especially the money and the sex, the men and the women that come along with that, the clubs, the traveling, the so forth, being able to do what you are able to afford to do. So moving on with that, it says that you admit that you were powerless over your addiction. And why? Because your addiction brought you to a state of hitting that bottom on all 4 levels. Till the bottom brought you to a consciousness that brought you to a place in your consciousness that you said, ouch, that hurt. That also, remember when I talked about earlier, I said it's the trauma that sets the stage for the addiction and the compulsion. And then I talked about, let me dip down here and get my notes. And I'm back. And then what did I say? Addiction. Now, I said there's 2 things that make up addiction and alcoholism. And I said obsession. And inside obsession is a fixed idea that takes us back time and time again to our particular drug or some substitute to recapture the ease that we once knew. And compulsion is, once having started the process with one fixed pill or drink, spoonful of food, game and chance, sexual behavior to include prostitution and promiscuous sex. That means you're going to have probably sex anywhere you outside at the bus stop, in a garbage can, in a garage. It says we cannot stop through our own power of will because our physical sensitivity to our drug, we are completely in the grip of a destructive power greater than ourselves. So inside of powerlessness and outside of what I just read, your whole will has been compromised. And you've experiencing it through your primary symptom, that denial, which is a key component of addiction, denying a reality, lying to yourself. That's exactly what denial is. It no longer exists at the level that it did. In other words, the disease hitting that bottom, and I said has caused the person to say, ouch, has caused the person to mentally, on the mental side, on the emotional side, on the spiritual side, the manifestation on the physical side has caused the person what? To look at their own disease of addiction. To say, okay, I got a problem going on and I know it. So that's how the powerlessness of addiction is. Through the obsession, through the experience of the obsession of breaking one's own willpower, their own willpower, it broke your willpower. And say, hey man, you're unmanageable. And the unmanageability of your life, your day-to-day living, your spiritual living, your emotional living, your mental living, the way you make your decisions and stuff, is evident that is something wrong. And you say, okay. In step 2, it says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And before I hit this step, I want to get off into the word could, because a lot of times people think that they think that they just get step 2 because it says a power greater than ourselves. But they really don't know what could really means. If you don't get step 2, you can stay clean, but you will not recover because of this word could. And what does could mean? It says, and I'm looking at the dictionary definition, we ain't going on mine. Could means, could is used, it says it's a verb, and it's the post of can, and it's used to indicate a possibility. Right, a possibility. And it's also used to making a polite request. So inside of step 2, if you don't get this step right, then you're going to have some problems in recovery. And I ain't saying using, but however, without this step, one thing for sure will be created is a reservation in your program. I'll put a bologna sandwich with cheese and lettuce and tomatoes on toast bread on that. That's right. If you don't get this, if you do not get this step, recovery will be limited. You're gonna have a struggle. And it's gonna, and what step 2 will also do will show you the leaks in your program, the cracks in your program, the holes in your program. So let's go back what it says. It says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. So a lot of times, what do people do in the rooms? When they think of a power greater than them, greater than themselves, they automatically go to what? To the proverbial God. They go to God. They say, well, you know, power greater than me is God. And I've heard in my 34 years in a room a lot of pros and cons about this stuff. But let me say this. If you don't believe that alcoholism, if you don't believe that addiction is a power greater than yourselves, then you got a serious problem. You got a serious problem. A very serious problem. The reason why I say that is because taking step 2, because it says a power greater than self, refers to a God problem, but you're not looking at your alcoholism and your addiction as power greater than yourself, they're going to come back up and get you. They're going to affect you in one or more of the 4 areas: mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Because remember, when I talked about the spiritual side, for example, I said inside the spiritual side, or what I'm defining spirituality is energy. It's just an energy. Well, what is alcoholism? It's an energy. And its components, obsession and compulsive, powerful energies. What is addiction? And its components, obsessiveness and compulsiveness, powerful energies. What is denial? Denial is something that uses other energies to create illusion. An illusion. I'm not going to look it up. I ain't going to be running around here looking up everything either. So that's what denial does. You know, and a lot of this, all you got to do is look at your experience, you know, tell the truth about it and how you got honest about it. Being inside denial, that's the first thing a person will do. When it's something that they want to be right about, they deny everything else about what's going on. They make up what's called excuses, and they start what? Lying to themselves. And what step 2 is basically saying is, you got to get, step 2 brings you to a point where you recognize all other powers, whether they're good or bad. And this is what it allows you to do. Let me tell you what step 2. I ain't gonna be all this on this traditional talk we got going around in both fellowships. This intellectualizing. Step 2 allows a person to be online at point zero where they are conscious of everything that their consciousness allows them to experience around them. That's what step 2. And that's why could is there. Because if you don't allow it to, you may not gain the experience that, if you're not conscious of what's going on around you, you may not have access to the power that you need to pull you through once it's revealed to you to that next level or next phase in the recovery that you need to be at. And that's why in certain books says, without this step right here, you ain't going to get no recovery. And part of it is why is because you will not have a spiritual awakening. That's all the way down to step 12, as a matter of fact. But we ain't there yet, right? Just like on that TV say, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, we ain't there yet. So anyway, moving on. Back to step 2. So it says we came to believe. And what's that part about belief? What it's telling you, it says, coming from step 1, from the admission of your powerlessness and your unmanageability, that there is something that can help you. That's where you came from, where I came from. And it says, greater than ourselves. And in ourselves, meaning me, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Because me of my own self and my own free will, look where it got me. It got me to a treatment center. It got me to a jail. It got me bankrupt. It got me, and everything else it got me to. Right. So moving on with this thing inside of step 2. And see, I'm going to go as far as to say this. You know, when I would talk to people and they'll say, well, yeah, I used to drink and drug a lot and go to clubs and, prostitute around and sell my body and take drugs and overeat and all that. But I turned my life over to such and such. And I turned my life over to God, or I just turned my life, they just turned their life over. So, some of them say, you will use this term, and I'm going to go out there. Well, I got saved. They'll tell you that. I got saved. All right, so you got saved, fine. I have no argument with that because I don't know what being saved is as far as turning over my life, my will. And I'm already been dealing with a destructive power, So once I got clean, I had to do some work. And getting clean was enough work. So moving on with that. What step 2 says is be prepared to look at some other powers greater than yourself and how they influence you. And it's also telling you this, how to get to a point where you can see the other powers out there, negative and positive, not how only they affect you, but how they're accessed through you. If that makes any sense, and if it don't make no sense, leave it alone. Leave it alone. But stay on the journey, because by the time we finish the step journey, it's going to all fall into place. So acknowledging the could part. The could is that I have to get to a place where my mind is open to the possibility of other powers out there. or other energies, because power, if you really want to look at it, is nothing but energy. That's all it is. And that's all we're dealing with is energy, energy, energy. And we're going to see that. I'm going to put it out there, and if you want to pick it up, fine. If you don't, fine. So the powers greater than ourselves is the energies that has a influence on us. And for example, inside of trauma releases certain energy such as resentment, anger, and fear. And their synonyms. And then there's other types of powers. Let me see. Hold up, my daughter. Bernice, let me call you back. I'm doing one of my YouTube videos right now, and you dead on it. So I'm gonna call you right back. So anyway, that was my daughter. You know, I had to answer the phone, right? Because I am known not for answering that phone. All right, so let me move on. So other powers greater than self is, and I talked about the negative side, but also I got my little notes here. I'm gonna take time and kind of like flip through them, and here we go. So other powers are love, faith, service to others, being a service to others. That's real powerful. Now, one thing about being service to others, if you want to select who you're going to be a service to, that's not really being a service. Because when you're a service to others, man, you really don't give a care who you help. Charity, hope, compassion, patience, tolerance, honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, anonymity. Why is anonymity such a power? And anonymity is one of the greatest powers out there, and I say one. It's because it's nameless. It means being in a state of bearing no name. You're not black, you're not white, you're not mother, you're not father, you're not daughter, you're not employer. You going on who you are. I got some cold coffee right here. Let me take a sip. I done had this coffee like for an hour, and it's like a third of a cup. So that's what makes anonymity powerful. Being empathetic, willing to listen to others. These are powers greater than oneself. I don't care what you say. I don't care what nobody say, and I won't even have an argument about it. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you're in a 12-step anonymous program. The fact that you're in a 12-step anonymous program, you're in a power, you're in something greater than yourself on two levels. The level of the program, fellowship. The level of the program, the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, the 12 concepts, and any other 12 you want to throw in there. And also the level of the fellowship. You falling up under the influence of the fellowship. It ain't got to be the whole fellowship. It could be one or two people in the fellowship. But here it is. Y'all are in the what? Y'all in the fellowship. Plain and simple. So these are powers greater than self. And because you believe in a program, because you believe in the fellowship, you came to. What? You came to a certain amount of sanity, looking at the sanity of the insanity that you live. And that's why the word could, and if you don't acknowledge the could, oh well. Yeah. And you ain't got to use. No. Because it's some other promises out there. It's what? You can go insane. You can go to jail. You can experience death or damn near death. So is insanity, jails, death, institutions are becoming derelict. And that's going to happen. One of them is going to happen to you. Yeah. One of those is going to happen. And some of us can front off like we got a quality of life that's good, you know, and I hear all that stuff. And that's not to say you won't get some degrees or get some money or you won't retire from your job. That's not to say none of that. So moving on, and I kind of like spend enough time on step 2, but like Arnold Schwarzenegger says, we'll be back. We'll be back. So, all right, moving on. Inside the next step is step 3. And in step 3, it says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. It says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And note, and like I said before, when I use the term we, I'm talking on the 4 levels or the 4 makeup of the human being. Mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional, the complete self, which contains the will of the human being. And what is this decision is made on? The decision is made on the previous 2 steps, everything before the previous 2 steps. Step 2, step 1, and it's based on your bottom. From the trauma to the denial, to the bottom, to the honesty, to the open-mindedness, to the willingness, to step 1, to step 2. And that's why I believe part of the reason why in some fellowships, when the newcomer comes in, the sponsor will have that person start writing definitions down. You know, and that's a good thing. You know, I did it. My sponsor, he had me writing stuff down. Go write this down. You know, give me a definition of that, and that's fine. Because I did have when I came in, you know, I had some words that I thought I knew what they meant. And y'all know I thought I had some socks on, and I don't. So anyway, let's move on, man. So in step 3, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives. And, you know, then you got some other shit, you know, sorry. You have people, because I'm really not trying to be vulgar here. Because you know what? Share a little something with y'all. My vocabulary is terrible. I'll be like, and so. Man, I'll be listening to myself. I'll be like, man, you talk like you look, man. I'm going to get a haircut today. So anyway, moving on, keeping it real. When it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And this is where I think a lot of people put themselves in a position to be challenged by their recovery, because what they're saying is, especially the ones that say, well, you know, I got saved, you know, and da-da-da-da-da. For me, ask yourself, are you really being responsible for the stuff that you did, not only to yourself, but to other people? To just say, well, you know, I'm saved now, or I'm a Muslim now, or I'm you know, really practicing my Jewish faith, or my Zionist, my Zayn faith, or I'm practicing this philosophy right here. On inside the 12-step model, that's not what's going on. You know, and I'm gonna leave it like that, because I start throwing some very judgmental things out there that might turn some people off, and I'm not trying to do that. So we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And turning the will over the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional side, and talking about your lives, your day-to-day lives, as your day-to-day life, your day-to-day lives, and whatever it composed of. And what you're going to turn it over to is the principles of the program. And it says, as we understood him. And like they told me when I first came in, they said, look, good, orderly direction, loving and caring. And then I told them, I said, well, look, I got a faith. I got an understanding of God. I'm a Muslim. You know what they told me? Nah, you're an addict. He said, you might be that next year or something, but right now you're an addict because look at your lifestyle. Look at what you practice. And I practice addiction. I didn't practice none of that stuff I came in the doors talking about I am. And when I hear people that, I say they in denial already. They ain't came out of denial. You are what you practice and what you preach, not what you preach. It's what you practice and what you preach. If I say I'm a Muslim and my religion is Islam, but I turn around and I'm practicing some opposite of that. If I say I'm a Christian and Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, but I turn around and I practice something opposite of that. I say I'm a Jew, Abraham is my daddy, and I go by the 10 Commandments or the Torah, and I practice something different than that, or I say I'm a yogi, and I practice one of the 4 main schools of yoga, but I do something different than that. Whatever I'm doing, that's what I am. I can't say I'm a straight person. I can't say I'm a straight person and I'm practicing something crooked. I mean, you can say it, but when people see you, they're not gonna believe you. So moving on with this game. So it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Now, here we go. Now we're about to get into the meat. Step 4. And people say this is a hard step. Nah, it ain't hard. Really, all the steps is hard. Which one of them ain't? To say one is more harder than the other, I advise you to work the steps. I ain't gonna say keep coming back, because it's a lot of people that's coming back. But anyway, let's move on. Inside of step 4, it says, we made a decision to turn our will and our life. No, it says, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And then ourselves means mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. It says, we made a decision. Now, what was the decision based on? The decision was based on everything from the traumatic event all the way up to step 3. Look at keeping it short and sweet. That's what the decision was made on. It was made on the traumatic event. Me looking at my obsessive and compulsive on the surface compulsive behavior on the surface level. It was also made at looking at my denial and how I got a peep of it by hitting my bottom. It was made by looking at my life when I admitted my powerlessness and my unmanageability. It was also made on when I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. When I looked at that, that's when I made a decision to look at a single energy. well, for me, in my understanding, there was the source. That's a bunch of energies, but for me, there was the source. And I looked at that one source, myself and that one source. So coming to step 4, I said I was ready to make a searching, excuse me. When I made that searching and fearless moral inventory, what it was in short and keeping it sweet, I decided to go back and look at the traumatic events that happened in my life. And that's what made it searching and fearless. And part of the fearlessness, and I ain't gonna even say a part of it, the fearlessness was I didn't want to look, I would get in the courage to actually look at what had happened to me and identify who, and also to look at my part. That's what made it fearless. Because a lot of stuff that happened to me involved my caregivers, the people around me, and certain relationships, where the relationships was based on trust. Those relationships was supposed to be based on love and trust, and a few other powers: faith, love, trust, service, patience, tolerance, honesty. And what happened as a result of the trauma, a lot of that stuff was violated. I was violated from the people, from my caregivers. And I'm just going to call it out what it is. And so the fearlessness was to go back and look at it, because I stayed in denial. See, part of my denial that kept me inside the act of addiction was I really didn't want to look at what happened, because it was what? So painful on all 4 levels. That's what that was about. Yes, sir. So when I went back to take it, and I didn't want to look at it, because any look was an inventory look on any level. And I was like, fuck it, I ain't looking at this. I'm not looking at what my mama did. I'm not looking at what my daddy did. I'm not looking at what my sister did or what my brother did. Because that's deep right there. When you talk about what your grandmother did, what your grandfather did. Because now you're looking at titles. And what the programmer calls, one of the spiritual principles called anonymity, I don't not want to take their titles away. Because anonymity means what? To bear no name. It means to bear no name. So the conflict or the love-hate relationship between the people, my family members and my caregivers, that was developed when I experienced that trauma. Through them molestations and them rapes. The feelings of shame and guilt, the resentment, the anger, and the fear. And see, one of the primary three main ingredients of the disease of addiction, Well, the 3 main components of the disease of addiction through the obsessive and the compulsive behavior is when the trauma hit. It took me in a tailspin, and then I started developing different coping skills. Lying, deceitfulness, to cover up my feelings and my emotions. That's why in some of the fellowships, they tell you, they say we are recovering at the level of what? Feelings and emotions. They ain't saying you're recovering at a symptom. The symptom, what was used to to help medicate the feelings and emotions. That's why you eat like you do, you gamble like you do, you have sex like you do, you drink like you do, you use dope like you do to medicate feelings and emotions. And what step 4 is going to be designed to do, once you put the primary symptoms down, is to help go in. You got to go in and you look at them. Because the next step, which is step 5, and it says, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. And let me say this about a wrong. Sometimes when people look at wrongs, they think of the wrongs that they did. But it's also the wrongs that happened to you, people. It's 2 parts to wrongs. It's the wrongs that you did and the wrongs that happened to you. Because check this out. During the traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, and let me pull that up so I won't be talking out the side of my neck. It says, then there's post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which occurs to an individual as a youth. So it's trauma that occurs to an individual in their youth. Somebody tell me, please, how is a youth, somebody in their youth, and youth is usually defined as anything from puberty on down, somebody really not knowing something, how they gonna do somebody wrong? Somebody please tell me that. Somebody please explain to me in the comments or send me a letter, call me on my phone if you know me, and tell me at 12 years old or below, how you gonna do something? Man, you don't even know. You can, your frontal lobe cortex, what allows you to make a sound decision, ain't even developed until you're 22. That's what the scientists say. So those wrongs are what you did to somebody else and what somebody's done to you. And part of that is to loosen up that guilt and shame that a lot of people carry. So in step 5, it says, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Now, so let's look at this part. It's in step 5, it talks about what? Exact nature. Exact nature. It says the exact nature of the wrong. The cause of the wrong. With the nature, where it came from. I'm almost tempted to look it up. But it says the exact nature. How this wrong occurred. Where did it come from? Where did it stem from? Because on the PTSD side, on the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder side, what happens is a person that age, man, they don't really know what they're doing. It's guessing. So they're what? Vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. So what happens traumatic-wise disorder, what happens when they're exposed to their traumatic event, which put their lives into a tailspin, or basically they get mixed up, they're confused, which is another way of saying that the individual is vulnerable. They're vulnerable. They can be what? Manipulated. Easily manipulated. So a very skilled person who's able to manipulate a person use the powers of manipulation, of being deceitful and lying, could manipulate that person into doing what? To doing whatever. And this is why the exact nature has to be looked at. And that's why in step 4, when it says fearless moral inventory, that's what it's alluding to. You take the fearless and the moral and you couple it with the exact nature. And then you look at it, not by yourself, but with somebody else. And then it says, that's when the person comes in, because it says we admit it to ourselves, to God, and another human being. So I just don't admit it to myself and go run off to another person. I had that one person there with me to admit that to, and they can help me with that. And we can do it all in one sentence, to God and ourselves and another human being. The exact nature of our wrongs, the wrongs that have happened to you. Then I'll show you in the next step, when it's talking about the wrong you did. Because here's the deal. Here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see what my camera, I'm on camera too. So here's the deal. In most cases, one that's made will make another. In most cases. If a child is abused, they will abuse another child. Because that's what they know. That's what happened. Somebody do something to them, they gonna do it to somebody else. Right? So let's move on. Because I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, and I'm glad. So let's go ahead. In step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. And I said that was 2 parts. The wrong that happened to you, and then the wrong that you did to another person. So I'm gonna take a little time out right here, and what I want to do is I want to sip my cold coffee. It's still good though. And I want to go over trauma. I'm gonna go over, take a couple minutes, be a little thorough, and go over trauma in this setting. So there's 4 levels of trauma. And I said this for the note, trauma is what brings the darkness over the individual. It brings darkness over mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Acute trauma. It says this level of trauma occurs when an individual experiences a single stressful or dangerous event. Single, that means one thing happened to them, they might have been molested. Took their life, put them in a tailspin. Then there's chronic trauma. You know, they was molested one time. Just one time. Set them into a tailspin. So Uncle Leroy molested little Johnny one time, and now little Johnny's life is in a tailspin. Uncle Leroy is a predator. Let's call it what it is. Now, complex trauma results from multiple traumatic events. It says chronic trauma occurs when repeated and prolonged to a highly stressful event. So, Uncle Leroy decides he wants to molest little Johnny as often as he see him, once or twice a week, and it's prolonged. And we're going to move on, because I'm going to show another side of that. Now, there's complex trauma, results from multiple traumatic events. So, inside of the complex trauma, what's happening is, little Johnny, he molested from Uncle Leroy. Then he go out. He sees a murder. Then he go out. He come home. He find his mama dead. Then he called the police. Police come through the door and beat him up because he didn't report it right or whatever. No, this is all hypothetically speaking. That's 4 events that little Johnny got a hold to. 4 different events that's highly stressful and dangerous situations. Now, on the PTSD side, where it says PTSD disorder occurs when to an individual as a youth. So let's say little Johnny is 12 years old, damn near at puberty. He's 12 years old and experienced all 4 events. That's his traumatic stress disorder. This is what's being inventoried. This is what's being inventoried. Moving on to step 6. It says, we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. And step 6 is a step of willingness. It's something that you're just willing to do. And what happened inside, going back to step 4, where it says, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So you go in, you do the inventory part. And what's going to happen, like I said, from the trauma, from the traumatic event, what occurred, what's developed is the obsessive and the compulsive behavior, which results in total self-centeredness, which is protected by the denial. Do you see how the system is slowly developed, which is protected by the denial of events, because everybody loves Uncle Leroy, which is protected by denial, and also the shame and the guilt that the individual might develop from these entire situations, of traumatic events, or these occurrences of traumatic events. So what happens is, now we start to inventory because certain character defects have developed, or defects of character, as a result of resentment, anger, and fear. And a person might start stealing, they might start lying, they might start acting out on violence, they might start doing the same thing that happened to them to others. So they develop certain character defects, you know? And so when there's me with and so again, working on that. However, what has happened is, in the inventory event, as the individuals start listing their character defects, what happens is they start coming to consciousness that their defects are what? Powers greater than themselves. Back to step 2. And how they act out on them. Back to step 1. And the open-mindedness part is in step 3, when they make a decision, they say, God, look at these character defects. Please help me. Guess where we at now? We humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Bam. Took you straight to step 7. We humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And now, going back to step 6, it says, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And these is a list that resulted from step 4 and step 5 mainly, but also some other defects could have came up in as one inventory, the process of, let me put my favorite camera on, as one as one inventory the process of the traumatic event, the obsessive and compulsive behavior, which those three alone will show from the obsessive and compulsive behavior, and also from the traumatic event, you're going to get some character defects. But these is a result of the list that was compiled from step 4, and that was talked about in step 5 with the human being that you went to God with, that you copped to, admitted to in step 5. And then in step 7, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And shortcomings are character defects. And because, okay, let me back up a little bit. Because you have a list of character defects, what's basically happening is on that list, the individual comes up with a lot of stuff. And I ain't gonna say a lot. I don't want to make sure like they got 100 character defects, but you might have about like 10, 15, 20. But it's experienced person will show you how to group them off into their synonyms and antonyms. But anyway, let's move on. So what's happening is in step 7, when you said, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Well, only thing a shortcoming is, as far as recovery is concerned, is a character defect. All it is a character defect in action. See, all your character defects you don't use. You only use shortcomings. So that's why I said, and I done said I got it from more experienced members that have more experience than me in the program, 40, 50, 60 years, in both NA and AA, that I tend to identify with or that resonates with me is that only thing a shortcoming is a character defect in action, or the use of a character defect, and that's a shortcoming. And how do I know when this shortcoming is causing me problems? Because when it's like the symptom, when it gets to the point where it's at the symptom and I'm experiencing step 1 all over again, that is bringing, that I can see the powerlessness and the unmanageability in my life, and I can see the insanity. I'm at step 2. Then at step 3, I say, oh God, help me with this, because I can't do it alone. And I can't just, how people say, get saved from it. I cannot get saved from it. The only way I'm going to get saved from this is that I experience it to the point where I hit a whole nother bottom in it, and I don't want to deal with it. And I'm feeling the pain of that bottom on all 4 levels of that character defect and shortcoming as I use it as a shortcoming. Right? That's how that goes. And what I'm going to do eventually is I'm going to come back with an easel and the board, and I'm going to set up like one of my mentors. You know, I'm a stepchild anyway. Yeah, Mike, I'm talking about you, Mike Johnson out of Detroit. And I'm going to run it like you did. Because like they say these days, man, that's the truth right there. That's the truth, my man Mike Johnson. So anyway, I'm gonna keep pushing on with this. So anyway, when we humbly ask him to remove our shortcoming, the humility part is I'm feeling it like I felt the bottom. And as a result of the powers greater than myself, shame and guilt that I'm feeling as a result of the behavior that I'm doing, what I have decided to do was what? Ask for help. And what will happen is some other spiritual principles. Let me back up a little bit. Shame and guilt, energy. That's energy right there, and it's negative energy, and it's dark energy, and it's what I'm feeling, and it's affecting my spirit. Let me hit it like that. And so I'm not feeling right because at some point between steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, steps 1 and 2 and 3, I became what? Spiritually fit. Because inside of step 2, on the could part, what happened was I've made the spiritual connection where that could is no longer a could in step 2. It became a is. That's right. Then I move on to step 8. Now, what's happened is in some other modalities, this is where the clearing occurs. That's why the 12, look, when you're dealing with the 12 steps, you're dealing with one of the most powerfulest programs on earth because it'll connect you to, look, this is like a universal tool. It could connect you to any other modality you'll fit in. And even in church, the mosque, the Zionism, the Jewish. That's why people take the program, the ones that have a good understanding. They'll take it and they'll take it to their church and say, oh, we're going to call this the 12 step for Christ. We're going to call this the Serato Mustaqim. Or we're going to call this the 12 steps of Antioch or something like that. That's how powerful this thing is. And my first sponsor, let me share this, Frank. Frank, he told me this one time. Me and him was talking, and he said, I asked Frank, I said, well, Frank, are you a Christian? He said, nope. He said, I used to be. He said, I go to church. He said, but I'm a recovering alcoholic. He said, I got the 12 steps. And now I see what? He had 14 years sobriety back in 86. And I remember the month I asked him, February 1986, I asked Frank that. It was February. Then I went skating. He said, now, son, go skate. I went skate. So anyway, so now what you've done is you started the clearing process of clearing yourself, bringing your energy to an equilibrium level, but now you're finna go to another part of the science. And it's the 8th step. Now, people talk about the 4th step. The 4th step is hard, the 4th step is this. But let's look at step 8 and 9. Inside of step 8, it says this. It says, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing. We became willing to make amends to them all. We made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make a list. Excuse me. Got ahead of my thinking. Y'all, I get excited when I do this. We made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So let's go. Because this step is, when I hear people share on this step, based on what I learned from old timers, I be wanting to start banging my head against the wall. Because I be saying, oh, okay. But you got to respect one's willingness. So this step right here, it says we made a list. And then there's an argument on who should be at the top of the list. Damn it, make a list. If you want to put God on it, fine. If you want to put yourself on it, fine. If you don't, fine. But here it is. When you work the steps, you and God going to end up on it anyway. Because you got to go back to step 3. Got to. It ain't no way around it. So you can start off making it how you want to, but look at how it's going to end up. So, all right, so let's look at step 8. It says, we, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, made a list of all persons we had harmed. So let's just say you don't put you on the list, and you don't put God on the list. But let's say you put your mama on the list. And we ain't gonna talk about what your mama did to you. It's the people that you have harmed. So let's jump all the way back to step 5, I believe. Yes, it is. Where it says, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Stop. What I'm going to do is list my character defects and my shortcomings. First, okay, let me back up. Let me back up. When I make my list, what I'm doing is I'm going to start it. Okay, let's just say it's me and mom, me and my mother. And she's on that list. And I believe I harmed her mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally in all 4 areas. My 4 areas harm all her 4 areas. What I simply do is I take my inventory of my character defects and my shortcomings. And I look at the relationship, the type of relationship we were supposed to have as mother and son. Should have had. I ain't gonna say supposed to. Should have. It should have been this way. But however, as a result of my active addiction, and I'm talking about symptoms and behavior, because check this out. I could have stopped using. Got 90 days clean. Got a year clean. But my addiction, my obsessive and compulsive behavior could have still, and self-centeredness could have still been running wild, rampant, and with the relationship of my mother. Yeah, and I'm just using one person, and you can model it off of that. So I look at how the relationship should be from son to mother. I inventory my character defects and my shortcomings on how they ran rampant inside that relationship. That's what I do. And I look at my wrongs, not her wrongs. Not her wrongs. No. I look at the stuff I did. I can't say, well, my mama had have done this, I wouldn't have done that. I just look at what the hell I done. That's it. I look at what the hell I done. And that's it. As in comparison to what the relationship should have been like. And I do it with mother, the father, son to father, son to mother, son to brother, son to sister, son to daughter, son to wife, friend to friend, not any quote-unquote friends, student to teacher, nephew to uncle. That's how that's done. And I write those relationships. And yeah, I could look at putting a dope man on there, putting that prostitute on there, putting that all the relationships. But this is how it's going to determine should the relationship go from an 8th step to a 9th step list. And it's going to be based on the relationship. I'm not going to feel I owe a dope man a relationship. Now, I might owe him some money. And if I owe somebody some money, I need to pay that debt. That's just the way I feel. Some people don't feel that way. But I ain't going to go looking for him. Like, hey, man, that $200 I owe you, well, here it is. If I see that dude or that woman, I'm gonna make some arrangements and pay him. Because that was a what? A business deal. Bottom line, it might have been a dark deal, but it was a business deal, and I need to take care of it. But why? Because I don't want to be looking over the shoulder for the rest of my life. Because I'm in a 12-step program don't mean everybody else is in a 12-step program. So let's look at the list. whatever that relationship was based on, if it was based on a legitimate relationship, I will move it to my 9th step list. I will move it. So let's say the person is dead or I don't know where they at, you know, or it was one of those relationships that, you know, I had, you know, like you had a relationship and you meet this person and you deceived them because you wanted something from them, like it was sex, money, or whatever, but you deceived them and you don't see, you completely dismissed them. You could put them on that list because how that was explained to me, those were the innocent victims of my behavior, of my addictive behavior. So, okay, so let's move on to step 9, where it says, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And what's happening here is, it says, we made direct amends to such people wherever, not whenever. Whenever is when you go looking. Wherever is when that situation presents itself. So I ain't gonna make a list and then go knocking on people's doors talking about, hey, remember when I messed you over? Well, I'm here to say I'm sorry. I'm here to say I'm sorry. No, it don't go like that. And amends don't mean you're sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry means, or I apologize means I apologize. What amends mean is you have a change in behavior, because ultimately, what does recovery mean? It means an active change in your behavior and your thinking. Those two together equals what? Recovery. That's what that means. So once I change the behavior, and I don't have to 100% change it, but once I enter into the initial change in the behavior and the thoughts and all that, amends is in order. That's the amends. Not, I'm sorry. How many times you done said I'm sorry and I apologize, you went back and done the same shit again? And while I'm mowing that, let me read this part. I dip down and I come back. And I'm going to tell y'all where I'm reading this from. Go to page 83 in the big book. Because I'm going to tell you where I got, it's only, and I'm only paying respect, but I'm quoting a lot of literature. It says, the spiritual life is not a theory. And that's what it's telling us. This piece of information is telling you, say, hey man, the life you living now is not a theory. And part of what a theory means is not based on quotes. You quoting some stuff. It's based on living some principles. It says, we have to do it. In other words, if you want to recover as far as the 12-step healing modality is concerned on a spiritual level, you have to. You got to do it. You got to work these principles in your life. And then it says this. Now check this out. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness will make a skeptic out of anyone. It says, there may be some wrongs we can never, this is not 8th, 9th step action. Check this out. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. It says fully, 100% right. It says we don't worry about them. If we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them, it says, some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. 9th step. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we do not delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scrapping. Now, check this part, and I get chills every time I read this part. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. We don't crawl before anyone. So if you doing the 9th step, number one, you be open-minded and you be considerate. But the main focus in the amendment phase is you changing your behavior. And it says some amendments, some things you ain't gonna never be able to fully right. Because look what you done did for 10, 20, 30 years. Messing over, playing with people's feelings and emotions. But inside the recovery process, going all the way back to when it told you, it says, in one literature it says this. It says with the attitude, so you can't have an attitude of intolerance or indifference towards spiritual principles. You got to believe that this stuff is going to work when you don't even think it's going to work. Now, inside the 9th step, it says, hold up, let me get up there. It says, we made the direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So you don't go walk up trying to make amends when you're going to hurt yourself with somebody, because you are others. Or bringing up something that you done did to somebody else at a very inopportune time. Well, I'm going to go knock on this person's door and tell them, hey, look, I'm sorry, I raped you. I raped your kids. Now, you don't do that. If it's time for that amends, it will present itself. Trust me on that. I got experience. I got experience on that one. Feel me? All right. And I really didn't mean to say that. So what happens from all the way to the attitude of intolerance and indifference towards spiritual principles, to honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, from step 1 to step 9, you have been what? You've experienced a clearing as far as the 12-step process is concerned. Now other doors are open. You want to go be a yogi, go be a yogi. You want to go be a preacher, go be a preacher. You want to go be an energy worker, go be an energy worker. Because now you have started clearing your own resentment, angers, and fears, and the synonyms that's connected to that. You are what's called spiritually fit to go walk a spiritual life. Now, step 11 got something for you. Got a job for you. Step 11 got a job for you. And step 11 says, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge for his will for us and the power to carry that out. And I hope my internet lasts, because I'm on the last 2 steps and I've been doing this for an hour and 30 minutes. So anyway, it says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. So at some point, I reach a certain humility where I go before God and I say, what it is that you want me to do? What's your will? Now here's the kicker. As I went through step 1, from step 1 through 10, and I skipped 10, I'm gonna get right back to it. As I went through step 1 through 9, I experienced my cleansing and my purging of my character defects and my behavior from spiritual principles of the darkness. So I came from out of the darkness into the light. I said, okay, God, what you want me to do? God's will automatically became my will, and my will his will, because I started working the steps. That's when that process started. So you ain't really got to second guess yourself. And as a matter of fact, if you're doing something right now that's on the positive side, that's contributing to your society and making that a better society, most likely 9 times out of 10, you are doing God's will right then and there. Second part is praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And the power to carry that out is this. A lot of times, shame and guilt will creep in, and that other voice will say, you don't need to do that. No, you don't need to go down there and help them people. You don't need to preach like this. You don't need to do that. Let somebody else do that. That ain't your problem. So the power to carry that out is being that, and this is what that means. What have been exposed to you in the meditative process. I'm coming back to step 10, because that's real important. In the meditative process. So we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. So we'll pray for the power. And usually the power is the courage, because there's going to be some other influences that has to do with that, right? And old behavior will kick in, and it ain't old. Let me understand that when people talk about, oh, well, you know, my old behavior, no, it ain't old. That behavior and that thinking ain't went nowhere. What happened is, as a result of the program, a lot of it started leaving, but it's like water going down the sink. All of it ain't left yet. All of it ain't left yet. Yeah, let me put my favorite camera on as I finish this up. So now, step 12. Step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Let's go down to step 2. It says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Without step 2, you cannot have a spiritual awakening. Because a spiritual awakening is a result of what? Coming to. And how you will be able to identify the spiritual awakening as a result of coming to believe is going to be through a power greater than ourselves. And we're going to see where that's going to come from in the next part of step 12. It said, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, oh, no, I'm sorry. Take that back. My mistake. As a result of the prayer and meditation. It's the prayer and meditation piece that where the spiritual awakening will occur, but it's going to be through a power greater than oneself. Not the God piece. Not only the God piece. Because God might have to come and say, look, you still so hard-headed, or you so full of fear, anger, and resentment that may have backed up into your life, that the power greater than oneself would probably be the one, the power that's greater than oneself as a result of the meditation process will reveal what needs to be done or not done. All right, thank you. Now, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to practice these principles we tried to carry this message, and the message is that this program works, and practice these principles in all our affairs. Now let's jump back down to step 10. Step 10 says we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So the step 10, and the reason why I brought it back to this part was, it's for the whole program, because how I was doing step 10 was, I was only doing it from like step 9 on down at one point in my recovery. But now it's for the whole program. You look at step 11 and step 12, step 1 through 9, with a step 10. It says we continue what? To take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And so the admission of the wrong, bam, part of it is going back to step 5, because what happens in the step 10 process is like a step 5 process. We admitted to, where it says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrong. Well, I'm not going to be perfect in my program. That's number one. You're not going to never be perfect. So having somebody to talk to or having different methods of review of character defects, character shortcomings, the exact nature of their wrong, and somebody helping you in your program, that's where this stems from. That's step 12. So it's an hour and 38 minutes. I've been on this. And like I said, I'm doing this for me because there's a certain place I want to get to, and I need to share like this. If any of this is helping you out, thank you. If not, thank you again. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to go over the 12 traditions, starting on my next session. Because sometimes I say, well, I'll be on there tonight, man. I don't show up for a couple of days because it don't be like I think. So anyway, I'm going to be moving into the 12 traditions. After I deal with the 12 traditions, then I'm going to go where this thing takes me into what I'm doing right now. So I'd like to thank everybody for paying attention. Those who are paying attention, you know, this YouTube thing is really doing great. At some point, I'll be starting podcasting. But my suggestion was to do 30 videos. They told me to do 30. And now I see why. Because when I looked at my first one, I was like, for real? I was like, oh, is that you? You know. And so my personality is, I guess I'm gaining confidence or whatever that I've already had. So in closing, you know, the 12-step model, the 12-step healing modality is powerful. And let's not underestimate it. Let's not try to confine the 12 steps anyway to a fellowship, you know, because they don't, as we can see, and proof is in the pudding. That's what they say. The 12 steps are all over the place now. Different methods of it, different configurations of the 12 steps are out here. But the basic 12 steps, and I'm sticking to the basics because that's what they told me when I first came around. They said, Suni, stick to the basics. Keep your shit out of it. That's what I'm doing. So anyway, I like to thank y'all. And this stream is over, and I will start on the 12 traditions, hopefully tomorrow night. You know. All right. I'm about to end this stream. Thank you.